Teams are not equally rested. Young teams can play over their head because a young team plays hard every night. Veteran teams, sometimes the dudes aren't locked in. They got injuries. You got nights off. And so, I don't think Memphis is a championship team. I think Memphis, in this stage, is a win a playoff series or maybe two team. But I don't think they're a championship team. Milwaukee did this for years. We watched them take baby steps, and as they grew up and grew and became better players, then you go from get to the playoffs, win a series, conference final level, and now you're a champion. And we didn't know if they were going to be a champion until last year. Middleton got hot. Giannis had a great final game, and you were like, okay, they're a champion. I don't think these teams are there yet. But everybody's killing Minnesota this morning, the T-Wolves, because, they just blew leads, and it was like historically bizarre. And here's Charles Barkley.
I told you, I picked Minnesota to win this series because they got talent, but they got no brains whatsoever. They got a coach who last game let his two best players get 4 fouls in the first half. That tonight he led a 21-0 run, a 21-zip run in a playoff game, and did not call a timeout. He led a team who was up 21. They scored 21 straight points, and this dude did not call one single timeout. Like, man, it's just embarrassing. Like, if I'm A-Rod and those guys, like, no, man, this is unacceptable. That was ridiculous.
So what's really happening is in the baby steps process of the NBA, Memphis is a year to a year and a half ahead of Minnesota. So Memphis is at a stage where they know who their number one guy is, and they can win when he doesn't play. Minnesota is transitioning to who their number one is. So let's talk about the T-Wolves for a second. I never do, so here you go. So years and years ago, they draft Andrew Wiggins. He's going to be our one. They figure out by year two, he's not the alpha. He's more of a 2 to a 3. He's probably a 3. He just doesn't have the killer instinct. The body can't put on weight. He's a 3. They get Karl Anthony Towns, too, and they think he's going to be a 1. And they found out he's too erratic, he's too emotional, he's a 2. So Karl Anthony Towns, you could win a championship if he's your 2. You could win a championship if Wiggins is a 3 or a 4, but they thought they were both 1s. No, Ant's a 1. Anthony Edwards is a 1. He's got Michael Jordan, Kobe-like killer instinct. He'll knock you out. Fearless, powerful, big man body. That's a 1. Now he's a kid, so he's kind of refining his game, but you're watching the T-Wolves transition to, we thought we had 1s. We got rid of Wiggins. We're going to move Karl Anthony Towns back, and now Ant's our 1. So by next year, Minnesota will be a team that will make the playoffs easily, and they'll win a playoff series, or maybe 2. So you're just watching this business, this basketball franchise. You're watching a transition in real time. They thought Wiggins was a 1. They thought Karl Anthony Towns was a 1, and they invested in him. And then you kind of find out very quickly with Wiggins, he's not. You find out more slowly with Cat, he's not. It's not a knock. You know how many true 1s there are in the world of basketball? 12, maybe 15. Embiid, Giannis, not a lot of. Devin Booker, many people feel, is a 2, and he's an all-star, and he's great. And so you're just watching the team transition. And during that transition process, for any business, any person, any team, it gets bumpy. You're not quite sure. So I'm not going to crush them. I think it just takes times with organizations. They thought Cat was a 1. They thought Wiggins was a 1. And now they got a 1. And by the way, when you get the real 1, you don't have to ask a lot of questions. Like you got John Morant. You figured out about 20 games in. That's a 1. That's a 1. You figured out Michael Jordan when he's, the true 1s, you don't have to ask a question about. You figured out really fast. And so they'll be fine. But Memphis is ahead of them by about a year and a half in the baby steps of the NBA. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. Even the Warriors. You're building, you draft, you develop. And with that, a guy who played in the NBA for 7 years, half of his career was with the Warriors. He's their news.
Well, speaking of losing a star, the Bucks announced yesterday that Chris Middleton will miss the remainder of the series with the Bulls due to a sprained MCL in his left knee.
Boy, this is going to be really feisty here because Chicago is a very good get-a-bucket team. They don't shoot threes. They're old school. They got a lot of guys that get a bucket. These are going to be tight games now.
Well, yes, Now, I think that Milwaukee will still win, but this is a serious injury. So he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. If the Bucks advance, this will provide a possible timeline for his return later in these playoffs. Over the past 2 seasons, the Bucks are 86-34 when Giannis, Middleton, and Drew Holiday are on the floor together, including the playoffs. He's been averaging 20 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, shooting 37% from 3 this year.
So I think we both compared Milwaukee a little bit to the Spurs dynasty.
Yes.
A dominating big who's a very good team-friendly guy, and surrounding players, Manu Ginobili, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Tony Parker, very good. All-star-ish. Very good. But we don't put them in the Showtime Laker class or the Warrior class or the Shaq Kobe class or the MJ class. Even the Heatles. They're not an all-time dynasty, but there's something there. Remember, we don't talk about the Spurs dynasty almost at all. We talk about all these dynasties. And I think where they're similar is the reason San Antonio's dynasty worked, and Popovich would rest guys before everybody else did, and they were always healthy and rested for the playoffs. They needed all their gas, like all of it. And if you'd have taken Manu Ginobili out in some of those teams in the playoffs, it's not the same.
Right.
And there's not as much room for error. And I just think Milwaukee's a team that could do a dynasty. They could win 3 in 5 years, but they don't have a ton of room for error. They don't have outside of Giannis, the two, Chris Middleton was basically a throw-in guy in a trade with Detroit. He's a good player. He's not Pippen. He's not Shaq Kobe. He had like 2 stars. I don't think they have a ton of room for error. That said, I still think they could win 3 titles in 5 years.
Right, but I think they need all of their pieces. I don't know that they can win and it's going to sound dramatic because, yes, I understand how great Giannis is. But the deeper you get into the playoffs, the more time Giannis is playing, the longer these series are. It's a lot on your body on top of a long regular season. And you had a long season last season because you won the championship.
Right.
So you played all the way through the playoffs last year. You need all your pieces. And Chris Middleton is a huge component to this team winning.
Yeah. All dynasties aren't even. Like, we know the Cowboys dynasty, those teams were ridiculously talented.
Right.
Like, the Patriots were well coached with Brady, but outside of the Randy Moss years, they weren't wildly dynamic down the field. Like, not all dynasties are the same, and the Spurs and the Bucks have that feel like they could be a dynasty. One's already been a dynasty. But it's like a boring kind of methodical.
Well, the brands are not the same. The stars are not the same. It doesn't have the same
explosiveness.
Yes. Now Giannis is an exciting player.
Yeah.
But he's still on a brand that isn't necessarily in that.
Yeah.
We don't speak about them in that type of air. But if they win back-to-back, that might change. But they're going to need Middleton to do that. He's just too crucial to what they do. Now, the series is tied 1-1. Game 3 is tonight in Chicago. The Bucks are favored by 3, according to Fox Bet, in this game. But these injuries could play a massive role in how things start to play out. Booker is out for a couple weeks.
I didn't think this would be a good series. The injury actually helps the entertainment value of the series because now these games are all coin flips. To me, it's a coin flip series. I would probably take Milwaukee because I have the best player on the floor late in close games, Giannis.
So after the Niners traded up to draft Trey Lance last year, it was assumed that Jimmy Garoppolo's time in San Francisco was done, but then he started 15 games and led the Niners to the playoffs. And there are still a lot of questions in everyone's minds about how this is all going to play out. And Jimmy G was recently asked about his experience last season dealing with all the uncertainty. His response was, "It was a strange year. I don't know if I wish that on anybody." This is really kind of the first time he's talked in any sort of negative light about it, though.
Yeah.
He was really great about it last year. He was very consistent. I thought he was a really good soldier considering the situation.
Yeah.
And went out there and played when they didn't put Trey in. So obviously he has injury issues, which I believe is the reason why Trey Lance is there at all, because Jimmy does win games. But you can't rely on him physically, and he underwent shoulder surgery this offseason. So they're still hanging on to him at the moment. He has $25 million this year. That's the tag that someone's going to have to pick up, obviously, if they get him. But I think there's a lot of components in play. I just think it's very curious that he's still there when there was so much movement.
We always talk about great teams and bad teams. I think the Niners are the most interesting team in the league next year. I think they're really interesting. Let me just throw this out to you. What if there's doubts in the organizations with Trey Lance? There's doubts.
Okay.
And they're thinking to themselves, okay, how do we slow play this, get some picks back? And so if it doesn't work, like a Green Bay, we don't get tagged for it. It's not embarrassing. It's like we tried, it didn't work, but we kept getting to the playoffs. Like the Green Bay Jordan Love thing is like, ooh, that's embarrassing.
No, it's a disaster.
That's brutal.
Brutal.
What if you have another one of those on your hands and you're like to yourself, okay, so is it possible to move this, move that? Deebo Samuel, can we I just wonder inside the building, if you don't know yet.
I think it's okay to not know yet about Trey Lance.
Okay, but Thanksgiving, we're going to have a discussion.
They just gave up a lot to get him.
They moved up
and they
like
had
the
options.
Packers did.
Right.